Ladies and gentlemen, here's a motivational speech in the style of Simon Sinek on the topic God has already worked it out, trust the process. The speech is structured for a 50-minute delivery, divided into key segments with natural transitions, storytelling, reflective pauses, and clear takeaways. Just like Sinek's style, blending purpose-driven insights with emotional depth and practical wisdom, remember what God said when the journey gets long and the silence gets heavy. The first thing we tend to forget is what God originally spoke over our lives. It's easy to remember the promise in the beginning, when things feel exciting, new, and filled with potential. But what happens when the path starts to feel like a wilderness? What happens when the signs vanish and the encouragement dries up? That's where many people give up, not because the promise changed, but because they forgot what was spoken in the first place. Remembering what God said is not just about nostalgia, it's about anchoring yourself to something deeper than the moment you're in. It's about going back to the original why, the purpose, the vision, the calling that stirred something in your soul. Because let's be honest, when we lose sight of what God said, we start to drift. We start to make decisions from fear instead of faith. We start to compare, to compromise, to chase clarity more than obedience. But remembering, truly remembering, reconnects us to the foundation. Think of a seed. When it's buried, nothing about it looks like what it's destined to become. There's darkness, dirt, pressure, waiting. But the seed doesn't panic. It doesn't change its DNA just because it's underground. Why? Because it remembers what it's made of. It knows what it's becoming, even if no one else can see it. And the same is true for you. You may feel buried, forgotten, overlooked, but what God spoke over you hasn't expired. His word doesn't return void. His promises aren't seasonal. If he said it, he meant it. There will be moments, many moments, when all you have is the memory of the promise, and that's enough. Go back to your journal. Go back to the verse he gave you. Go back to the dream you wrote down in the quiet place. Go back to the time you heard his voice so clearly that it brought you to tears. Because faith doesn't always come from seeing, it comes from remembering. When David faced Goliath, he didn't have a blueprint or an army behind him. What he had was a memory. He remembered the lion. He remembered the bear. He remembered that God showed up before, and that was enough for him to move forward again. Here's the danger of forgetting what God said. You start letting your circumstances rewrite your identity. You start letting fear have the final word. You start measuring your progress by the pace of others. But when you remember what God said, it recalibrates your soul. It brings clarity back to your steps. It silences the noise of doubt, distraction, and delay. Because truthfully, your mind will always find reasons to quit, but your spirit, if anchored to the promise, will find the strength to endure. When you remember what God said, you stop reacting to the pressure and you start responding with purpose. You stop needing every detail to make sense. You stop demanding to see the whole staircase. You just take the next step. Because you're not walking on your own authority, you're walking on a word, and that word is enough. In moments of frustration or fear, instead of asking, "What's next?" maybe the better question is, "What did he already say?" Because the promise still stands. The process may look different than you imagined. The timing may not be what you expected, but the word still holds. And sometimes trusting the process begins with simply remembering where it all began, with a promise, a whisper, a vision, and choosing to believe that if God said it, he's still working it. Be faithful with the now. One of the greatest tests of faith is not in the waiting, but in how we wait. It's easy to look ahead, to fix our eyes on the promise, to get caught up in the dream of what's coming next. But the truth is, what you do now matters just as much, if not more, than what you're praying for. Most of us are trained to believe that purpose only shows up when the platform appears. That meaning only kicks in when we arrive at the next level. But Purpose doesn't start when things get big. It starts when no one is watching. It starts in the small. Being faithful with the now means stewarding what's already in your hands, even if it doesn't look like the future you imagined. It means showing up with excellence, with integrity, with energy, right where you are. The truth is, if you're not willing to be excellent in obscurity, you're not ready for visibility. Because what you do in the dark determines what can survive in the light. David didn't become king the day he was crowned. He became king tending sheep. He learned the rhythm of leadership when no one was applauding. He fought battles in private long before he was celebrated in public. That's the principle of being faithful in the now. So often we want God to trust us with more influence, more opportunities, more favor. But the question is, can we be trusted with what we already have? Are we honoring the season we're in, even if it feels slower than we hoped? Are we showing up in our work, in our families, in our daily routines with the same passion we'd bring to a stage, a promotion, or a breakthrough? Because how you treat the ordinary is what prepares you for the extraordinary. If you overlook today, you'll miss the preparation for tomorrow. There's a temptation in waiting seasons to check out, to go on autopilot, to say this job doesn't matter, this situation doesn't count, I'll try harder when the real thing shows up. But that mindset delays the very thing you're praying for. Being faithful with the now says, even if this doesn't look like the vision yet, I'm going to treat it like it matters because it does. You don't get to fast forward the process. You don't get to skip the reps. You grow through what you faithfully show up for. Sometimes the miracle isn't that God changes your situation, it's that he changes you in the middle of it. And often, what you're doing now is not just preparation for what's next. It's a test, not from a God who wants to trick you, but from a God who wants to trust you. He's asking, can you be faithful with little before I give you much? Can you be trusted with someone else's vision before I give you your own? The process will always ask that question. Being faithful with the now requires discipline, yes, but it also requires perspective. It's about seeing your current season not as punishment, but as purpose, not as a holding cell, but as holy ground. The temptation is to devalue your now because it doesn't look like your future, but God often hides purpose in what looks like routine. There's sacred work in the mundane. There's preparation in the pattern. And if you're too focused on what's next, you'll miss the greatness hiding in what's right in front of you. You don't have to love the season to be faithful in it. You just have to believe that it's not random, that your now is connected to your next, that every moment, every step, every task, no matter how small, is part of a larger story God is writing. Be faithful with the now, and you'll be ready when the door opens, because it's in the unseen that character is forged. It's in the present that legacy begins. And how you show up here determines what you can carry there. Would you like this tailored into a devotional, reading, teaching guide, or spoken word script next? Stay in community when life gets uncertain. When the path feels unclear, our first instinct is often to isolate. We pull back, we shrink, we withdraw into our heads, into our fears, into the lie that no one else could possibly understand what we're going through. We think we need space, but what we really need is support. We think isolation is safe, but it's actually where our faith begins to erode. Because the process is not meant to be walked alone. The process is personal, but it's not solitary. That's why community is essential. There's a reason why people lose vision in isolation. When you're alone too long, your thoughts start to echo louder than truth. Your doubts grow unchecked. Your fears multiply in silence. You lose the ability to see clearly because you're viewing your life through the lens of your pain instead of the perspective of purpose. That's why community matters. Because when your voice starts to shake, you need someone beside you whose voice still carries strength. You need people who can remind you of who you are when you forget. You need people who speak truth when you're tempted to believe lies. You weren't designed to carry this journey on your own. Even Jesus, in his most vulnerable moments, didn't choose isolation. He invited community. In the garden, he asked his closest friends to stay awake with him. He wasn't afraid to need people. And if the Son of God knew the power of not walking alone, how much more should we? Faith grows in connection, strength multiplies in unity, and when you're surrounded by the right people, you can endure seasons that would have crushed you alone. Community isn't just about encouragement, it's also about accountability. The process can get messy, you can get distracted, you can drift without even noticing, but people who love you will call you back. They'll challenge you when you settle. They'll remind you of the promise when you start to compromise. You need people in your life who love you enough to say, hey, that's not you. That's not what God said. That's not who you're becoming. Without that voice, you can confuse survival with success. You can end up building something that looks impressive but is completely disconnected from your calling. Being in community doesn't mean surrounding yourself with everyone. It means being intentional about who you let speak into your process. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerable places. You need people who are rooted, people who don't panic when life gets hard, people who won't let you give up just because it's uncomfortable. The right people will not only pray for you, they'll stand with you. They'll believe for you when your own faith feels weak. They'll hold you up until you find your strength again. But staying in community also means being that person for someone else. It's not just about receiving, it's about giving. Sometimes the healing you're looking for comes when you choose to show up for someone else. Sometimes clarity comes not from analyzing your situation, but from encouraging someone in theirs. We're wired to grow together. We're built to lift one another up. There's power in shared pain. There's healing in shared hope. When you stay in community, you stay grounded. You remember you're not the only one waiting, not the only one trusting, not the only one wondering when the breakthrough will come. That shared journey, that shared process. It builds something deeper than success. It builds resilience. It builds compassion. It builds character, and it reminds you, you are not alone. Trust God's pace. One of the hardest things to surrender in life is pace. We don't mind trusting God if he moves quickly. We don't mind having faith as long as things unfold on our timeline. But when things slow down, when the momentum fades, when the timeline stretches longer than we expected, suddenly our trust is tested. Because deep down, most of us aren't just waiting on God, we're trying to bring him up to our speed. But the truth is, God doesn't rush development. He paces it. And if we're going to trust the process, we have to trust the pace. It's easy to believe that faster means better. Our culture is obsessed with acceleration, quicker promotions, instant breakthroughs, overnight results. But growth that is rushed is rarely sustainable. The things that are truly valuable take time. A tree that shoots up overnight is a weed, not an oak. Deep roots aren't built in haste, and neither is character, maturity, or wisdom. So, when God moves slowly, it's not because he's forgotten, it's because he's forming something in you that speed can't produce. There's a rhythm to the way God works, and it rarely matches our expectations. Think about it. Noah built an ark before it ever rained. Abraham waited decades for a promised son. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading people out of slavery. Even Jesus waited 30 years before stepping into public ministry. God is not in a hurry because he's not just trying to bless you. He's trying to build you. And what he's building in you takes time. When we try to outrun God's timing, we end up creating shortcuts that cost us more in the long run. We settle for relationships that aren't aligned. We force doors open that were meant to stay shut. We push opportunities that aren't ready, and neither are we. But when we trust God's pace, we stay in alignment with His process. We stop striving to manufacture outcomes and start surrendering to divine timing. And in that surrender, there's peace. Because it means we no longer carry the pressure of figuring it all out. We just walk with Him, step by step. Sometimes the delay isn't punishment, it's protection. What you're praying for may be good, but God knows when you're ready for it, and sometimes He'll withhold a good thing so it doesn't crush you. His pace isn't about denial, it's about development. He's not trying to slow you down, He's trying to strengthen your capacity. Because the future He's preparing you for requires more than you have today, more patience, more depth, more clarity. So the process becomes a sacred space where God is not just moving you forward, He's preparing you to last once you get there. Trusting God's pace means letting go of comparison. Just because someone else is moving faster doesn't mean they're moving better. Someone else's highlight reel is not your timeline. What looks like a delay in your life may be divine timing unfolding. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where you need to be if your life is surrendered to Him. He knows how to move you when it's time. He knows how to open doors when you're ready. You don't have to force what God has already prepared. There is freedom in trusting the pace. It releases you from the anxiety of performance. It frees you from the pressure to prove. It allows you to rest in the truth that God is not just aware of your journey, He's orchestrating it. Every step is calculated, every pause has purpose, every delay has design, and even when it feels like nothing is happening, everything is happening, just not at your speed. God's pace is perfect, and the more we trust it, the more we grow, not just in patience, but in peace. Because trusting the process ultimately means trusting the one who holds the pace, and He's never late, never early, always on time. Don't quit in the middle. The middle is the hardest part, not the beginning, because the beginning is filled with vision, excitement, and energy, and not the end, because the finish line comes with momentum and the taste of fulfillment. The middle, that's where most people walk away. That's where the silence gets loud. That's where things stop being shiny and start becoming hard. And it's in that exact space between what God said and what hasn't happened yet that the voice of doubt starts to sound like truth. But here's what we need to remember. The middle is not the end. It's not the full story. It's just a chapter. It's a place of development, not defeat. And if we quit in the middle, we forfeit the very thing we've been praying for. The middle is uncomfortable by design. It's where the process refines us, shapes us, and reveals what we're made of. It tests our motives, it stretches our faith, and it prepares us for the promise. We live in a world that glorifies instant results, fast wins, quick fixes. But kingdom purpose doesn't come overnight. There is no shortcut to becoming who you were created to be. There's no fast track through the wilderness. You have to walk it. You have to live it. You have to trust it. And it's in the middle where you decide whether you truly believe what God said. Faith isn't proven at the starting line or the finish. It's proven in the space in between. The middle is where you're tempted to settle. You start thinking, maybe I misheard God. Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe I should go back to what's familiar. But going back won't take you forward. It just keeps you stuck in cycles God has already called you out of. The Israelites were set free from Egypt, but in the middle of the desert, they started romanticizing slavery again because the uncertainty of the journey scared them more than the pain of the past. That's what happens in the middle. The past starts to look appealing and the promise feels too far away, but you weren't built to go back. You were built to move forward. When you're in the middle, it's okay to feel tired. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to not have all the answers. But don't stop. Don't pitch your tent in the valley. Don't settle for survival when God has called you to breakthrough. Keep showing up, keep taking the next step, because everything he's doing in you now is preparing you for what's ahead, even when you don't see it. He's working. Even when it feels pointless, he's positioning. Even when it feels like you're going in circles, he's developing something deeper than you can imagine. You might be in the middle of healing, the middle of waiting, the middle of building something no one else can see yet, but don't despise the middle. Don't discount it. This is the stretch that makes you stronger. This is where grit is born. This is where character is formed. This is where your identity gets anchored, not in what's happening around you, but in the truth of who God is. Quitting is easy. Anyone can quit. But trust, endurance, resilience, that's the mark of someone who's walking by faith and not by sight. And the beautiful thing about the middle is that God is right there in it with you. He's not just waiting at the finish line. He's walking beside you through every hard step, every silent night, every tear-stained prayer. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not stuck. You are becoming. And if you just keep moving, you'll see the fruit on the other side. Don't quit in the middle. The promise still stands. The story isn't over. The best is still ahead if you'll just keep going.